Adam from North Carolina. Come on, button. Why don't you push? Yeah. What up, Adam? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I've been a somewhat long-time viewer of both of your contents, particularly Paulogia. No offense to you there, a godless engineer, but just for whatever reason, I like to watch. I think the first time I saw Paulogia was a while back when he debated. What's that guy's name? Jonathan McClatchy. And so that's when I really started to get into your content. You
can't be watching that much because you don't know how to pronounce it, but that's all right.
Okay. What am I getting? I feel like I've heard people pronounce it multiple ways.
You have, and I take no offense. I just think it's just kind of funny. But carry on. I'm excited to talk about you. We're both excited to chat with you. What do you got for us tonight?
Okay. So part of this was inspired from I watched a live stream with James Fodor on his critique of
Adam, I hate to stop you right at the beginning, but is there any way that like you could shift like your body weight or something and get a better reception on your phone because you're going in and out and I can't really follow you?
All right, how about now? I got my mic again. Is that better?
No, you're still kind of phasing in and out there, bud.
Okay. All right, how about now? Is that better?
Nope. Maybe we should pray to God for better bars.
Oh, let's see. Okay. Is this any better?
It is.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you can't hear us.
One of you saying yes, the other saying no. So
I think we both said yes. We both said yes.
Oh, okay. My apologies. All right, cool. So I was watching a live stream with James Fodor and you, Paul, and so I wanted to follow up on the Kalam and see if you still have the same thoughts about the Kalam. Do you still think that argument doesn't work?
I still think it does not work.
Okay.
I mean, hold on. If I can interrupt real quick, like if Paul, if he felt like the argument worked, would Paul not be like at least a deist or some kind of theist at that point? Like the fact that he's still an atheist over here on Skept Talk kind of seems like he wouldn't. I don't know. It just kind of confuses me. I'm not going to focus on it. It just kind of confuses me why you would still need to ask that question. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, it's just to be sure, I don't want to make assumptions.
Yeah, that's fair.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So, what premise of the Kalam do you take most, problem with, or do you take problem with the argument as a whole?
Well, which formulation do you use?
So, I guess to be simple, the standard Craig version. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
So my problem, and I will absolutely let John chime in as well, but my problem is that I don't, that number two, the universe began to exist. You'd have to define universe. And if universe means our particular instantiation of space-time, fine. But if you mean the cosmos, if you mean all matter and energy and everything that ever existed, then I don't think we have any support for that premise.
Okay, and it's kind of like digging into maybe a potential multiverse, or you're saying you think that there is matter beyond or something beyond our physical universe, our space-time and matter that we call the universe, or
so what you're breaking up again, so whatever you were doing, you should go back to whatever that was. I heard enough of that for it to say that I think that there's something beyond or energy beyond. I think that is entirely plausible. I think that is what most, as I understand it, that's what most cosmologists posit, that there is, like, for example, if the singularity expanded, that whatever the singularity was, pre-existed in whatever sense pre-existing or before makes sense, if you're talking about before time started. But all the experts in this area, whether they use multiverse or no matter what theory they use, they all seem to say that there was something, energy, for example, before the Big Bang, before our instantiation of space-time. So I'm going along with that and saying, man, that's sure plausible. And since a theist is in brute fact land, right? God is just a brute fact. I don't see why energy as a brute fact is any less dishonest. And in fact, by Occam's razor, it's one step simpler, right? Because I'm not multiplying entities. So that's sort of where I'm at, and I will let John chime in once I'll let you respond, and then I'll let John go.
Okay. So I would say it sounds to me. I have a new defense actually that I've with for the second premise of the Kalam, and I was really curious on both of your thoughts. If it worked, do you think that the singularity is a physical thing? Can we agree on that?
I don't.
I
mean, it's part of I would consider it part of the material world, if that's what you consider to be a physical thing. I guess so.
Basically, just like between the dichotomy of physical or metaphysical, it would be physical, right? Unless you think that's a false dichotomy. Okay. So,
John,
go ahead, John. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, I was just going to say, I guess I don't know what you mean by metaphysical in that particular aspect. I mean, in the aspect that the singularity would represent a compacted, like an ultra compacted point of all, space-time, matter, energy, and all that kind of stuff. Like if that's what you're talking about, then it would be physical in some kind of sense in that way. But I guess I have a little bit of problem with the whole physical aspect, maybe because like when the universe inflated, like it was too hot and dense for even atoms to form. So it's kind of like, what do you mean by physical at that point? So I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too deep into this, but I'll agree for the purpose of whatever you're putting down here.
Okay. And so I'm just trying to lead into my argument to make sure what I predict the first premise would probably be the most contested, but let me lay it out for you really quickly and see what you guys think. So premise 1, physical things are causally contingent. 2, the universe is a physical thing. Therefore, the universe is causally contingent. Causally contingent things cannot exist prior to the cause they are contingent upon. Therefore, universes exist. No?
No, because I already told you, I think that energy is a brute fact. Energy is a brute fact, not causally contingent. You think God is a brute fact? I think energy is a brute fact.
Yes. So is energy a physical thing?
I mean, kinda.
Okay. So then you're going to say that energy is physical, but you reject the first premise.
Correct. I don't think you could demonstrate that energy, which can neither be created nor destroyed, is not a brute fact. I don't think you could demonstrate that. But maybe you can. I should let you go. Maybe you can demonstrate that it is contingent in some way.
Well, the initial argument is physical things are causally contingent, and I would argue that, yes, I take the first law of thermodynamics to be true, but I also take the second law of thermodynamics to be true, right? Which is that entropy is forever increasing, and this would include usable energy. So I think that kind of, it can tie together. If matter is to be created, it can't be potentially, like if we want to apply the first law, it maybe would be better explained by something not physical.
You hold on. You said the word usable there, right? So you seem to understand that second law of thermodynamics is with usable energy.
Yes.
Who's to say that the energy cannot be reclaimed who's to say that all the energy in our instantiation of space-time is all the energy in the cosmos? Like, these are things that none of us can know on this panel.
Well, I'm not saying anybody knows these things for certain. So I just think that it's more likely if the universe began to exist, then the cause would not be something physical, as the universe would consist of all physical reality. Now you could put like the argument of a multiverse and say, well, there are multiple verses. That could be like an infinite regress. Is that the kind of direction that you would prefer to go, or are you still rather stick with the brute energy?
So I really want to get John back involved, but I will just throw in, because you're asking me specifically. I told you up front that I don't think that our particular universe represents the entire cosmos, right? That there's more energy potentially, at least that's what I'm told, or that it existed in some state before the Big Bang. So now I've forgotten the question. But can you repeat the question for me?
So I was trying to I'm trying to gauge where you're going. Are you trying to say that there's other verses? I don't want to say other universes because that's weird.
Thank you. Yes. No, I don't care what model, because lots of cosmologists have models. I don't adopt any given one. I feel like some of them are plausible, but they're not hanging their hats on them, so why should I, as a non-expert? But what all of them have in common is that energy, or that, like, there's something that predated in whatever makes sense in a timeless, like, we just can't wrap our head around, right, what it might mean to exist in a timeless state. So before time, stuff existed, is what cosmologists tell us. So I just go with that, and I don't really care if it's multiverse or expanding, contracting, or any of those kind of things. I just go with Occam's razor on this. We know that energy can be neither created nor destroyed. So what's to say that energy is not the brute fact that managed to not have entropy? Like, entropy needs time, right? So what would entropy even, like, if you want to say that entropy was at play, well, how do you know what entropy does with absent time?
Well, there probably wouldn't be entropy absent time because there are no changes.
Is potential energy physical there, Adam?
I would say that energy is physical. Yes.
I asked specifically potential energy. Is potential energy physical?
Well, what do you mean by potential? Like potentially converted one form of energy into another? Is that potential?
I'm Googling potential energy. This is a well-understood concept in physics, by the way. Potential energy is the stored energy in an object due to its position, properties, and forces acting on it. So basically, like, if you want to think about like a ball sitting on the edge of a table and a cat comes by and is about to knock the ball off, the ball would have potential energy, like, because it's it's going to be acted upon that. So there's that. There's also chemical energy, which isn't necessarily represented physically, but it is released upon a chemical reaction. Think of like an explosion of some kind. So, like, this whole idea that energy in all of its forms is physical is the reason why we're a little bit confused and hesitant to agree to this whole physical nature of energy. So, I don't know. I would suggest maybe reading up a little bit more on physics and the laws of thermodynamics and all that other kind of stuff if you're going to be making these kinds of arguments. I mean, personally. But also, I feel like the energy at the beginning of the universe, like this state in which energy was in, that, energy can't be created or destroyed. I think that it was more likely a release of energy similar to a chemical release of energy in, like an explosion. That's why it was, the misnomer at the very beginning was Big Bang, because it was supposedly like this big explosion. That's how they explained it. So I'm more in favor of this great release of an immense amount of energy. That personally, I find convincing the quantum fluctuation sort of model for the beginning of our universe. But also, I'm kind of curious for you, what do you think was there before this universe inflated? Like, are you the kind of theist that thinks that there was absolutely nothing and then God, farted the universe out, or like what do you think was there beforehand?
Well, I don't really think that there is necessarily a like one way or the other. Like I'm not really convinced of one side or the other because it ultimately doesn't matter for the theist position. And by the way, I wanted to clarify.
I think that it does.
Energy is physical. I wanted to clarify. Potential energy in general is physical, and those potential energies would be enacted by causal contingency. But
I mean, hold on. You just went from not even knowing what potential energy is to now trying to school me on what potential energy is.
Well, I was just asking you to clarify. I just wanted to make sure. And forgive me, I have a problem with second guessing myself and what other people say, because I always want to make sure I'm 100% clear on what we're talking about.
I mean, I guess I feel like I disagree with you on the physicalness of potential energy. I think that potential energy can become realized energy in a physical way, and it becomes physical at that point. But I think potential energy, much like chemical energy being stored up in an object, isn't necessarily physical at that point. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess I would just disagree on that. Maybe I just need to read up more on the intricacies of the different kinds of energy. But the reason why I'm asking you this as to, your position of theist and why you're proposing the Kalam Cosmological Argument here, I feel like if you think that there was absolutely nothing at the beginning and God farted out the universe, that has a number of different issues. Like for one, why do you think that the causal principle, this whole idea that everything that begins to exist, has a cause? Why do you think that would exist, be like logically necessary and state of absolute nothing, for one? For two, how can a being or an entity or whatnot even begin to think outside of time and space? What kind of medium was he in that allowed him to think, act, or do anything if there's no way for him to actually do those things? And I don't really have a third, but normally lists and threes are very compelling to a lot of people.
Fair enough. So I definitely don't agree with the absolutely nothing, because if God exists, then there's something. That something is God. So the absolutely nothing thing is kind of weird. No physical thing maybe, but not absolutely nothing. But back to really quickly, back to the energy thing. The reason I was clarifying is because potential energy is definitely physical. It converts to kinetic energy, right? And that's measurable. These are things that are directly measurable, and so that falls in line with conservation of energy. But anyways, as far as how I would make an inference of what happened beforehand, or that doesn't make sense. Sans creation or sans universe, that would be metaphysical entities can exist as they're not required to be within space, time, and matter, as they're metaphysical. But the notion that there was absolutely nothing, that is I think that's not necessarily a contradiction, but the closest thing to a contradiction, maybe without being a contradiction. Okay. That's probably not true.
Okay. So then you would then have to admit that there was space-time existed before space-time existed? Like, am I just misunderstanding?
No, metaphysical doesn't
argument?
Require that. So there are.
Is metaphysical a real practical thing?
Is metaphysical a real practical thing? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, yeah, if something is metaphysical, does that mean that it exists in reality?
So yes, it would in this case. And there are a couple different ways that people have looked at this, and philosophers have looked at this throughout history. For example, we already talked about him, William Lane Craig. He has the view that God is timeless sans creation and then enters time upon creation. And once he creates, that's the first action in time.
Okay.
And then time begins. That's one view. I don't really know if I take that view or not. I would probably take the more Ryan Mullins view, which is, or actually a lot of philosophers have taken this view, which is there's a divine temporality. So maybe some form of non-metric time, sans creation, or some form of different time as opposed to our physical time that we experience here within the universe. Does that make sense?
No. That sounds like
Really?
Jordan Peterson were a bullshit like words. Like I feel like I could go to the Jordan Peterson generator website and probably come out with something with more substance.
Well, can you actually like show me how it's incoherent rather than like make an ad hominem?
That's not technically an ad hominem. An ad hominem would be like, you're dumb, therefore you're wrong. That would be an ad hominem. And all I did was kind of insult the word salad that you gave. I wasn't actually trying to argue against it, primarily because I really don't. I guess I really don't understand the word salad that you gave me. Like none of it sounded all that coherent. Like, as far as understanding it in practical reality. Like, for instance, let me just give you an example. Like this other kind of time, I'm not exactly sure what a non-metric kind of time would be or how you would even measure that or even if it would be measurable. But I did happen to Google, just a basic Google. I normally go deeper than like the AI generation of the first like little scroll of Google, but it literally says metaphysical ideas often conflict with modern sciences because they are not based on direct experience with material reality. So, I mean, you're basically saying that these are ideas that are not directly experienced in reality. So I don't see how the metaphysical can physically exist in reality or practically exist in reality when they're literally not experienced in material reality.
So it sounds to me like you're saying if it's not materially measurable, if it's not empirically measured, we can't determine that it's true.
I think that if it exists in reality, it's going to be perceptible in reality. And I feel like if you can't somehow perceive it in reality, whether that's indirectly perceive it or directly perceive it, then you probably shouldn't believe it, at least not with like good evidence that suggests that you should. So like the spiel that you've given here, I just don't see why we should believe that, for one thing, this entity outside of time, our time and space, does exist, for one, but also exists in an area of reality that has a fundamentally different kind of space-time that's non-metric and all this other stuff that seems to not fill any kind of space, but yet also at the same time permeates all of space. I just don't understand. You understand how all of this seems very contradictory, and it's kind of hard to wrap my brain around.
I would love for you to point out the explicit contradiction.
I mean, I kind of feel like I just did. God exists outside of our time and reality in a different... No, I did. So God exists outside of our time and space in a special kind of time and space that is non-metric, that fills no kind of space whatsoever, but also this God seems to permeate all of space-time. How does that make sense?
So, I mean, you're adding things that I never said. What I initially said was ways that God could have existed sans creation. I haven't actually particularly pinpointed a specific view because I go back and forth. I'm not sure which one is true. But what I do think is true is that it's more likely that a being, an entity with the capabilities, the prerequisites to start a universe, to begin a universe, is more likely than energy beginning a universe. It's funny because you bring up like empiricism and empirical verification. We've never seen energy create a universe. So
that is ridiculous. Adam. What is Occam's razor?
Yes.
What is Occam's razor?
Whatever of two competing theories, whichever is the simplest is more likely to be true.
No, actually, that's not Occam's razor. Occam's razor is that you should not multiply entities beyond necessity.
I mean,
and to maybe
theories,
translate.
Yes.
Well, two competing theories. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. Go ahead. You can finish reading what you're gonna that paragraph there, whatever you were gonna say.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just gonna say too. I guess the way that I generally think about it in terms of like the competing hypotheses, the hypotheses with the least amount of ad hoc claims or statements attached to it is going to be most likely the accurate hypothesis.
There we go.
And
so Adam, you just told us that yours is more likely. And yet you are adding on things that we've never had demonstrated, right? You have a God, and now you're adding on, well, the problem with God is maybe he needs a special kind of time, and maybe he needs a special kind of space. And every time you throw one of those on there, right, you're multiplying. Every time anyone throws one of those on there, they're multiplying entities, right? They're adding ad hoc assumptions that are not necessarily contradictory, not necessarily implausible, but are absolutely adding on to things that we cannot demonstrate. Whereas energy,
you realize you've done the same thing with energy.
No, because energy exists. Do you deny that energy exists?
No.
Okay. So all I'm saying is the energy before whatever we consider to be time existed already. And that's all cosmologists say too. That is not multiplying an entity.
Okay.
I'm entirely drawing upon entities that we agree exist. Right?
Okay. So we've agreed so far, but you have to add this energy had the prerequisites in order to establish the beginning of a universe. It had to cause the universe to begin to expand. We haven't seen that.
Uh-huh. Okay, but you understand that observing something, a one-time event, or as far as maybe it happened thousands of times or millions or infinite times, we don't know. But observing is not how we determine science, right? Like observation means virtually nothing. You don't like so. For example, we've never. If you take the example of a fly that lives one day, a mayfly. No mayfly has ever seen a house constructed. So is a mayfly because they haven't lived long enough. Should that mayfly then rightfully assume that no houses have ever been constructed?
No, that would be a black swan fallacy.
Okay, so when you're telling me no one's observed a universe pop into existence, okay, like what is that? That doesn't mean that energy is insufficient to explain it. Cosmologists tell me that they think energy is sufficient to explain it. And I'm not a cosmologist.
Yeah, it's ad hoc reasoning. That's what I'm saying. It's when it's necessary
but it's not,
or needed.
But it's not multiplying. But it's not multiplying entities. And you haven't demonstrated that the cosmologists are wrong and that energy is not sufficient. You feel in your bones that it's not sufficient.
Right. Like, even if we were to assume what Paul is doing, hold on. Even if we were to assume what Paul is describing here is like one ad hoc claim, you've got about 5 or 6 ad hoc claims in your particular hypothesis here about God. Like, I know that you're not adhering to one particular thing or another, but I mean, just the entire premise of an entity existing outside of time and space, but yet also would permeate time and space, which is, generally what theists would say. I mean, all of that is like tacking one ad hoc claim onto another ad hoc claim, multiplying the entities in your hypothesis. So even if Paul were guilty of adding one particular unsupported claim, which he's not, but even if he were, it's vastly more likely that his hypothesis is correct versus your hypothesis, which is riddled with ad hoc claims. We do need to wrap up here because I got to get to announcements, and we also have 4 other callers to get to. But I don't want to leave you hanging, so I'll let you make kind of a final statement here.
Okay. that kind of sucks because I had a lot more to go through, but that's okay. Permeate is that means to spread throughout, to pervade. So that's a physical term. If God is metaphysical being, then that's not applicable. So you're like giving me ad hoc reasoning I'm not using. We would both pretty much have the same ad hoc reasoning. We would both insert one, and then we would go from there to see which theory or which hypothesis has more explanatory power. But I'm not going to have time to get into that today. So I guess thank you guys for your time, and hopefully I can call back again with you guys on here in particular. I don't suppose you know the next time you'll both be back on here.
We don't, but it happens.
Yeah.
But,
all right.
But thank you so much, and I appreciated the nature of your call and your demeanor, and keep it up, Adam. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that was quite interesting. Yeah. So I definitely wasn't trying to suggest that, Paul, you were adding any kind of thing on there. But,
I knew what you were doing. You were willing to concede for the sake of the argument. Absolutely. I just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I didn't want you to think that I was like, yeah, he's adding ad hoc shit, but that's not as bad as you, kind of thing.
I got where you're going.
Okay.
Thank you for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, perhaps you should join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
At patreon.com/calltheline.